Welcome to the Generation X Wing podcast, a modern look at a retro lifestyle. My name is Rob Williams, and I'm here with
Jamie Pale Rider.
Now, Steve and Neil cannot be here today, but we got a very, very special guest, as you can probably see below here. We have the artist, music producer, and content creator of Heatley Brothers or Heatley Bros on YouTube. If you don't recognize the name, you'll recognize the music, because if you've ever watched any of our videos on YouTube, I use his music quite a bit, and it's something I've been following for quite a few years. And so we have Brett Heatley from Heatley Brothers. Say hello, Brett.
Hello. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. When I discovered you a few years ago, I just was totally into 8-bit music and just trying to find free music for our videos. I mean, non-copyright sounds was one of them. And then I came across yours and I was like, this is what I'm looking for, because it's playful, it's fun. It brings me back to my youth, and us being of a Generation X-Wing, generation. It kind of brings me back to our Nintendo days, our NES days, our Super Nintendo days, all that sort of stuff. And I really appreciate the effort and quality of your music, especially the quality of the music. And I had to take an opportunity to bring you on the show and talk about not just your process and more about the YouTube channel, but also really good question of why royalty free. So let's start first of all about a bit of your history, Brett. Where you from? How'd you get into the business?
Yeah, thank you. I grew up in Florida, and but it was also a military kid, so I jumped around even overseas in England for a while, Spain, Rhode Island, Colorado, Mississippi, and
wow, that's a lot of places.
Yeah, once I graduated from college, I moved out to LA to kind of start my career in music and business, and kind of landed in Pasadena, met my wife, and then moved to a place called Sunland. So from there, I worked in music. I worked in YouTube specifically, and in the back end, in the copyright world of music rights management. And that's where I learned that I could create some music of my own and deliver my music to those systems. And then I realized I could make it available for people to utilize, and I'd be able to kind of manage the whole situation. So I had like a backseat access to the YouTube environment, and wanted to make my music available for everybody, so to get kind of exposure. And so I kind of had the pieces of the pie that I needed to kind of go forth with that, and my passion for making retro video game content. So it's been a long journey, and the last few years, especially after COVID, it kind of slowed down a little bit, which was, I have 2 daughters and a family. And so that's obviously taken up some of the time, and my career got more serious. I got, elevated in that as well. So, but it's never not continued. I've actually been working really, really hard on some cool projects related to that, and some other kind of more experimental music production stuff that I've been doing. So it's an ongoing journey, and particularly with the Heatley Bros, the name comes from my, the love and affection of growing up and playing video games with my brother. And then all the music that those old retro games, the music dominated those games, right? There wasn't any voice actors at the time. Yeah. So the music really kind of steered the narrative and how you felt about what was going on screen. And the name is an homage to that spirit. And the characters that I've created kind of play into that as well.
Where do the characters come from? Because obviously, in my background here, this is the more updated version, but the original version was kind of this nice little, almost Kirby-esque sort of character. Where'd that come from?
Well, I mean, it was I had a vision. Actually, initially I had a vision more closely aligned with what they look like now. I was working with my little sister, who's an artist, and we kind of drew up those first iteration of them just in our living room. And she said before she made the bodies, she was like, hey, what if I did this? She had little arms on the head. And I was like, oh, that's really cute. Let's go with that. And then, and it worked with like the type of 8-bit music that I was making at the time. And so that's kind of where it originated. And then I met another artist online, Toomey Life, Toomelife, yes, Toomey Life, who was gracious enough to create the second iteration. He was just doing some fan art, and I loved it. And so we kind of collaborated on the creation of that, and I used that for quite a while. Those Kirby characters that you're probably more familiar with. And then COVID happened, and I was also having an itch to advance it a little bit further. And so I met with another wonderful artist, Beralai, Beralai, and kind of worked with him and drew, kind of came up with these characters over the course of a year and did a few cool music videos with him. And I love where they landed. And now I'm working with another artist to kind of finally bring it into a video game setting. As some of my recent posts, if any of your viewers check it out, you'll see what those characters are starting to look like and how they'll look in kind of a platform style. So it's taken on a lot of iterations, but we're kind of bringing it all together now and creating the story, the backstory, the universe in which they live. And I'm really excited about that, honestly.
So you mentioned kind of getting to see behind the curtain of the YouTube music licensing business.
Still,
is that, what about that influenced you to kind of do the royalty free or like license free music?
So I mean, it developed over time, like the business model, but the goal is to like get your music out there. There's a million people making music. What's the way to get the most kind of saturation? Because I wanted to make it a professional career, and I wanted to it started off as like an online portfolio, and then it was kind of this kind of slow realization that like, put this out and allow everyone to use it as much as you possibly can, because that exposure and the opportunity for people to use it. I saw some early successes with people utilizing it for theme songs and things like that, and just kind of recognized that maybe that's the way to go. And I worked in rights management, still work in rights management, and I think I was actually a little cautious about it, because it's kind of an antithetical approach when people are trying to protect their music and you're out here trying to give it away. But I thought it's an experimental new age model. And I've talked to other artists about it, and over time just kind of like became more confident in the fact that like, kids are going to use what they can use for free. So might as well make your stuff available as much as you can. If you want to make some rules around it, then all the better. But, so I use an attribution license, which means you can use it as much as you want. You just got to credit, the artist in the description of the videos. And as long as you do that, you're good to go. I have actually helped build an automated system in the back end of YouTube that checks for that. And if that's there, then you're good to go. Kind of helped in the back end kind of create the solution that I needed to be able to facilitate the copyright arena as I needed it to exist. So it's been a fun merging of what I do in my business world and affording me what I want to create in my musical endeavors.
Okay, so I understand if you don't want to get too deep into like the personal or the personal business side of it, but
no, I can talk
for a layman like me on the outside, how do you make a profit if it's not copyright? How do you make a profit if you're not charging anybody? I think that's a lot of people have a lot of questions about.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it comes in all sorts of forms, because, one of them is that if you don't do that bare minimum copyright claim, can happen. So, so there is some monetization on that. And that's what I mean by like a new age business model. It's like, it's letting you use it for free, but you have to comply with the rules. And, there's a lot of different business models out there. And if you don't want to comply with that, then don't use the music. Right. But enough people, I think, feel that that's pretty fair, right? You have your music solution completely frictionlessly handled, and you're able to utilize all the music that you want in the entire catalog, so long as you just provide very simple attribution in the description. And then also, because it becomes popularized through various mediums, YouTube channels, video games, and some awesome examples. And people are looking for music in their Twitch streams and some playlists on Spotify, right? So and you get revenue from all the traditional kind of streaming sources, as well as your music gets more popular and more recognized. And then on the YouTube channel, of course, and and then through some copyright claims and everywhere else. I put it on Bandcamp, I put it in licensing worlds. But if you're diligent enough to go try to look for it on YouTube, that's where I leave like the pot of gold, where you can actually get it for free if you learn to use it correctly. So experimental, but it's it's been working pretty well.
That's a great example, actually. I didn't even think about that because I also use Epidemic for a sound service, and I know there's all these rules you have to follow, and it's quite strict on how you make sure that it's linked in all the connections you make. Right. But to find them, I would use my Shazam and say, oh, I was watching this video. I like this song that they're using. I wonder if it's copyright free, or if I wonder if it's on my Epidemic. And so when I Shazam it, I'm like, oh, okay, I know where I can find that. And I look to see, and it makes those connections. And so I can see what you're saying. If someone's hearing a song, he's like, I like that. If they know to go in the notes, or it's listed on the bottom corner, or whatever it is, then they can go to your YouTube site and say, okay, let's check out some more stuff.
Yeah.
And, that's okay. That makes sense now. Okay, awesome.
For any other artists that ever see this, hit me up, because I can set you up with the same kind of business model. So we can talk about that later or whatever. But I feel like there's a bunch of people in the video game music space that allow people to use their music, but they don't have any method of tracking it or enforcing the rules that they've asked of the audience. And their fans and other people that want to use it, right? So I've tried to voice it on Twitter, but I have a small Twitter following, and so, it's like, unless you have tens of thousands of followers, like no one's like looking at your stuff.
Well, that's true, because I remember I found this one song by another artist who I really like, so I reached out to him personally and said, can I use your song for my song for one of my videos? He says, yeah, no problem, just credit me. And so I did. Yeah, but exactly. Then it still tagged me as copyright, and I'm like, okay, so there's that. I guess there's certain people that have to still know the behind the scenes of so I don't have to get tagged, or maybe that's how it works. It's a funny world of copyright music, because it becomes so widely available, and a lot of people assume it's free, and they'll just rip it off the YouTube or whatever, instead of having to go to pay for it. Now everything seems so easily accessible that a meme all of a sudden becomes free for everybody, and I can imagine how you figure that world out behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, I've been working in the back end of YouTube for like the last 11 years, so I've seen all the iterations of it. I've been involved in all sorts of aspects of it, and it's the best system that there is. Honestly, it's far superior than any of the other social media environments in a lot of different ways. So I've had the time to figure it out for sure.